Starting with the presentation of what a craft ecosystem is, I would like to just say a few words about the methodology that we used in order to present this idea. We started to think about how we can define craftsmanship, a craft person, and we started to review the literature about these topics and to identify all the words that were used about craftsmanship, craft activities. So here on this page, you see a lot of words that we used and that we tried to put together. From isolated words, we started to create connections, and we gathered some words together because they were making sense together, because they were linked to each other. So starting from the literature review, what we can take as a first step, it is that craftsmanship does not exist in itself, but always it is embodied by a craft person. In a way, it is also the basis of the intangible cultural heritage theory. We cannot speak about intangible cultural heritage if there is no people, communities that make this knowledge alive. So that's why at the center of our ecosystem of crafts that we tried to design, we put the craft person. This is the first step. Of course, a craft person by himself cannot practice. This person needs some other elements, like, for example, the workshop where the person works, the materials, which are the materials that are needed to practice a craft today, which are the tools, which are the skills, the knowledge, the processes that are followed, but also which are the types of products that can be created. And of course, also the business models that different craft people use in order to make sustainable their production. This is a very simplified model that we created, and the idea is that when we will study the different crafts that are involved in the project, we can, starting from this element, identify different models. For example, the workshop can be a workshop where only one person works, but it can also be a manufacturer, a more complex system of production. The materials can be local materials. They can come also from abroad. That can be new materials. So the idea is that starting from these different elements, we can describe different situations that fit also the real situation of the pilot cases that are involved in the project. We added also a third step, which is a bit the context that describes the situation where a craft activity is exerted. That's why we added some elements that permit us to understand and to describe and to analyze the framework within which a craft activity is exerted, and that can have an influence on the practice of a craft. In this framework, there is, of course, the legal framework, the policy framework, the tools that are implemented to sustain craft activities, but that can also become a constraint for craft people. And of course, the institutions and the actors that can be public, private actors. We can have ministries, we can have Chamber of Commerce, we can have foundations and other institutions or actors that are supporting the craft practices. Another element of this larger ecosystem concerns the safeguarding. It is important to transmit this knowledge through formal and informal education, but also it is important the attachment to a community and to a territory, everything that is done to promote the cultural value of crafts through museums, exhibitions, films, and other processes. And it is important also to think about the values of crafts, how they evolve, and which values we want to transmit to future generations. We have a last point that we wanted to develop because it's also one of the objectives of our project. Craftsmanship and crafts activities, they are not something that is meant to be always the same. They keep evolving, they keep transforming. And so in this last part of the ecosystem, we tried to identify some elements that push craft practices to transform through creative processes, thanks to the contact also with suppliers, with customers, that interact with craft people in order to propose new products and creations, and thanks to the interaction with the markets. Another element of transformation is the innovation, the new technologies, the digitalization, and the last elements that we identified is the one related to sustainability, how the issue of sustainability today pushes the craft system to adapt, to evolve.